Hi, this is Gilles, the radio prepper. In this video I'm going to make a delta loop antenna for the 30-meter band, 10 megahertz. Now, I made one before for the 6-meter band, 51 megahertz, and it seems to work pretty well. So it's an interesting antenna. Presumably it has slightly more gain than a dipole. Not much, but enough to be interesting. And being in the shape of a triangle, you only need one pole, one mast to hold it. So I can't help but think that it might be a good idea to try on 30 meters. Since the wire has to be attached to the top of the pole, I've made a little adapter here, a cap to go on top of my Spiderbeam 12-meter pole. And this was made by 3D printing. And I'm going to show you how I did that. Now this one is going to be made out of PET plastic, which is stronger than the, I think that was ABS for the other one. Here we go. That should prevent the part from getting loose, basically. It's going to stick better to the glass. And now with the base in place, it should stay on the glass. Amazing. The cap will go right here and the wire will go through this hole here. Now I've made a hole on top of the adapter too, so that I can drop some epoxy here to so that the wire doesn't move. Since the wire probably will need to be trimmed a bit, I will only do this after I adjust the length of it. This wire will be a full wavelength long, so close to 30 meters. The impedance of a full wave delta loop is about 120 ohms, which is kind of far from 50 ohms, which is what the radio wants to see. Normally I would use a quarter wave length of coax cable, which is 75 ohms, and that matches the impedance pretty well. I did that for my 6-meter delta loop, but in this case I don't have that cable. What I do have is a 4-to-1 balun from Spiderbeam that came as a kit, and this will divide the impedance by 4. So 120 divided by 4, that's 30 ohms, but 30 is closer to 50 than 120. I will try the 5-meter length of coax cable, 75 ohm coax cable later when I get one. Now 5 meters, you'll say, well, it's not exactly a quarter wave on 30 meters. No, but you have to consider the velocity factor of the cable. That means that the current in the cable goes slower than the speed of light in the wire. So a cable like RG58, actually in this case RG, I think it's RG59 for the 75 ohm version, has a velocity factor of 0.66. So you multiply a quarter wave by 0.66 and you get about 5 meters. Of course, all that is not very precise, and it's basically trial and error. Trim the wire to the best length possible and then add the impedance matching solution that you have, either a 4-to-1 balun or a 5-meter 75 ohm coax cable. When I get my 75 ohm coax cable, I will use it with this BNC adapter. Basically the wire will go from those two poles here, and the coax will plug into the BNC connector here. Of course, with the balun, you already have the BNC connector right here, and the wire attaches here. By the way, I will put the file for this Spiderbeam 12-meter adapter on Thingiverse, and I'll put the link in the description below. For the length of the wire, for metric, I will use 143 divided by the frequency in megahertz, in my case 10.12 megahertz, and multiply that by 2, because that's the formula for a half wave. I want a full wave in the shape of a triangle. For standard, you use 468 divided by the frequency in megahertz, and that will give you the length of the wire in feet. I have everything I need to build the antenna here on the table. A spool of wire I got on eBay from the UK, the BNC adapter, my 3D printed adapter for the mast, and for impedance matching the 4:1 balloon from Spiderbeams. Now this could be replaced once again by a 5-meter length of 75 ohm coax, which I will try later. Now I will cut 28.26 meters out of this wire and thread it into the top of the adapter here, that little hole. I'm going to mark the wire at every 9.42 meters, or actually that's 9. I need to add 42 centimeters. Every third, basically, to make a nice triangle shape. Now the most efficient shape is a circle, but it's hard to make a circle with a wire. The next best shape for the delta loop is a square, but you need 2 poles for that. So the most practical is a triangle, and you need only 1 pole. So I'm going to mark this at 9.42 centimeters, and again I'll add 9.42 and I'll have a nice triangle. Of course I'm going to be trimming the wire, so I'll have to redo these markings later, but for now it's just going to help me to make a nice triangular shape. You can see here that this is where I'm going to drop a little bit of epoxy once I have determined the correct length of the wire. I'm also going to thread in this little Spiderbeam's plastic thingy, just to have an attachment point for the lower corner. I am first going to test the antenna without any impedance matching device, so just to determine the correct length of the antenna. A low SWR doesn't mean that your antenna is necessarily radiating correctly. The right size does. So that should present an impedance of about 120 ohms, and I'll test that with my antenna analyzer. It is certainly bulkier than my half-wave and fed wire I usually use, but well, it's more than twice the size, but it's a little bit heavier too. This is of course a heavier gauge wire because it's longer. This is a full wave. This is a half wave with a much smaller gauge. So you have to consider that in transporting this antenna. This is going to be heavier than this one. Pretty nice view. The reason I came here is that I can attach my 12-meter Spiderbeam pole to those fence posts because it's not something you can just stick in the ground with a spike. This is going to be really solid. I really like that. Couldn't find a better place. Well, the center wire is drooping quite a bit and the pole is bending. I don't think you could make a much bigger antenna as a delta loop for than 30 meters. And this is the first graph, and it is obvious that the wire is too short. It is resonant on 10.7 megahertz and it should be 10.12. But in my head I was convinced that it was too long and I cut a foot off, and that was a big mistake. The result of which is this. It's resonant on 10.9, even worse. You can see here that at the resonant frequency the SWR is 2.6 to 1, easily matched with a tuner. However, at the frequency I want to be using, 10.12 MHz, it's 7.7 to 1, and that's really bad, unusable. Now I've added the 4 to 1 balloon, and I'm hoping the impedance will be divided by 4, which should be low enough to be tuned by my K1 tuner. At the resonant frequency, the balloon gets it down to a nice 1.4 to 1. Excellent. At my operating frequency, it's 2.7 to 1, which the K1 will have no trouble with, but it still will be much less efficient since it's going to be just the same as if I had 7.7 to 1. So I have my K1 set up here, and the internal tuner is going to take care of the mismatch and my mistake, but fortunately I can still operate and try to make some contacts, see how this antenna behaves. It's not optimized, it's not the correct length, but we'll see what happens. Leipzig, Germany. Thomas.
It's got 100 watts. Sunny over there. And cloudy. $24, not bad. Saying goodbye, hope to hear you again. And there was some QSB, so I couldn't hear everything I said.
These are my spots on the reverse beacon network, and it might be small because there are so many. I also had another QSO with another German station, DL50AB, but I guess you guys had enough Morse code for one day, especially that I'm sorry I didn't have the time to translate today. But I had many spots, and which shows that even mismatched, this antenna works really well.
So, I cut this antenna too short. and then I cut it too short again. That's really stupid, but hey, you know, that's how you learn. And may that be a lesson to myself and you guys. Don't cut your antenna too short, because it's much easier to cut a little bit, to trim it, than to add some length, and I couldn't do that here. It seems to work pretty well though. I made 3 contacts, and of course the band is opening up right now. It's 4:30 p.m. local, and that's the time I have to go to edit this video. So 30 meters works better at the end of the afternoon. It's not a midday band, it's a mid-afternoon band, but it's a great band and I really like it. The balun, the 4:1 balun, seems to be taking the SWR from 2.6 to 1 to 1.4 to 1, so that works really well. I yet have to try with a 5-meter 75 ohm cable, and that's why there will be a part 2 with an antenna slightly longer to the correct length, and I'll have both the cable and the balloon. So far it's difficult for me to comment on performance, the band being not quite open, and of course I don't have an antenna here that I can compare it to, and I should have run probably Whisper with my QCX on 30 meters to see if there would be a difference between the delta loop and half wave and fed. Probably not. I'm guessing it's probably not going to be better than a hand-fed half-wave, or if it's slightly better, probably not enough to justify having so much wire up and something that's really not discrete. But I'm sure performance is there. I mean, there's no doubt about that, but is it the best choice? That remains to be seen, and we'll see that in part 2. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Until then, have a good one.